So let's say you found a skeleton. How would you tell it's a dinosaur? You personally, how would you decide?
Well, interesting question. I don't know. I'd have to do some research on that.
Hey there, everybody. Welcome to the Catholic Church Created Islam Part 2. For those of you who didn't see Part 1, you're probably missing a whole lot because, it's the whole setup for this, but I'll go over that real quick. But first, I want to say hello to Vishanti, who is one of the core parts of my Reading Dumb Stuff crew. Whenever it's time to read dumb stuff, she's on the short list of people I invite.
I hate myself.
Yeah. Basically, it's just one of those things where it's like misery loves company, and apparently I hate Vishanti too. So
hate you right back, buddy.
Aw. So yeah, let's do a quick summary of last time on crazy
summary.
Well, okay, so basically it goes like this. According to Jack Chick and this guy who claims to be an ex-Jesuit from the the Canary Islands or something?
Yeah.
Okay. He's an alleged ex-Jesuit from the Canary Islands who got a super secret, totally not for public consumption briefing at the Vatican for some reason. Which actually, that's another thing with the internal logic. It's like the same thing with like Bob Lazar, right? Like, oh, you got these super secret briefings from the government or whatever shady organization about things that you don't really need to know to do your job. That seems kind of convenient.
I will say this in not defense of Bob Lazar, but in credit to 1/64th of his story. He does have some documentation that he did government contract work. However, that still is requiring a lot of burden of proof on him to prove that he was at S4 and saw aliens and they synthesized an element and all this other crap.
There's documentation that I was in the United States military. That doesn't mean that if I just make up some nonsense and say, well, I heard it at a military briefing, that you should take me seriously.
That's the thing. It's like that I will get nitpicky with just a very small percentage of people that criticize him because, again, only a very tiny fraction of his story can be corroborated.
Yeah. Well, look.
Very.
The idea that some guy worked for the government is not exactly a far-fetched
Yeah, that's
claim.
not a stretch.
Right.
Yeah.
Valkyrie Vision sent a $9.99 super chat with no message. Thank you very much, Valkyrie Vision. Valkyrie Vision, I want to say thank you for always reminding me when I make stuff that is not super convenient for the visually impaired, because I try to make sure that my stuff is as accessible as it can be, and obviously something's going to be lost because it's a visual medium. But she's always on top of me and saying like, "Hey, you got to give an explanation for this, or you got to make sure that you tell people what's on screen." Whenever I forget, so I really appreciate it because you know what, I want this channel to be as accessible as possible, and like YouTube usually takes care of like the hearing impaired with their okay-ish captions. They really don't have anything automatic for people who have trouble with vision. So I appreciate that someone is staying on top of me and making sure that I don't neglect that. So
it's nice that at least some websites are kind of globally enabling like alt text and things like that. For instance, like Twitter has it where every time you upload a photo, you have the ability to add alt text for people who are using screen readers. So that's pretty sweet.
Yeah, that's a nice feature. And yeah. Oh, anyway, so to sum up of what happened last time. Okay, so the shell story of this is that there's some guy who was a correspondent during the Lebanese Civil War. We're not going to go super heavily into the Lebanese Civil War. It was and is kind of a disaster, but
yeah,
it's not terribly important to the actual story. This is just, like I said, it's the shell story. It's the story that happens to give an excuse as to why you're hearing the main story. So it doesn't just start with a history lecture. Even though that's almost all of what it is. It's just text-heavy history lecture in the form of a comic book for some reason. But the basic idea is Satan creates the Catholic Church. At some point, it's a little nebulous because it bounces back and forth several centuries. And then the Orthodox Church, the Eastern Orthodox Church, the Oriental Orthodox Church, the Nestorian Church, like as in like the Nestorian Church of the East and whatnot, as well as probably like the Armenian Apostolic Church, which is also a separate group of Christians who aren't any of those other ones, are actually all just the Catholic Church and under the control of the Pope, even though most of them have as a big part of their identity that they're not under the control of the Pope.
No,
Like,
those are just details.
Yeah, it would be very strange to tell an Orthodox priest like, oh, you're just a Catholic who's under the control of the Pope, because like
After he finished stroking out, he would.
Yeah. Because it really is a major part of like the identity of those churches that they're definitely not Catholic. It's like at least as big a part as like that aspect of Protestantism, where they're like, oh no, we don't accept the authority of the Pope. Yeah, that's the same kind of deal there. In fact, they were doing it first.
Counterpoint from Jack Chick. No,
But then the bizarre thing is that Jack Chick thinks that the Pope created Islam by one, having lots of like papal agents in the Middle East, because of course the Christians there are apparently Catholic, and then hiring a former rich woman to marry someone so that he could then, independent of that, go have visions in a cave, which she could then take him to her cousin, who was conveniently also an allegedly Catholic monk, who would then tell him that it's a prophecy from God, so that the Pope could then control his education, and then he could defeat the Orthodox powers of the Eastern Roman Empire, who were already Catholic, apparently, but still the Pope needed to conquer them for some reason. Like, it doesn't even begin to make sense. But basically, it's just an excuse for Jack Chick to be like, oh, all the non-Protestant Christians are all part of this monolithic evil. Which, okay, Jack. But let's see. So, we are here, and now, all right, Vishanti, last time, unbeknownst to me, you took over the role of the person who was basically going to be doing all the reading.
Yeah, that's not happening today.
I don't want to do that to you again. So, yeah, I'm gonna.
That's not happening.
You can read
I'm not
some speech bubbles.
coherent enough.
Yeah. So you can read some speech bubbles, and I will read the block texts. As I told Vishanti, I just finished off some coffee, so now I'm moving on to a glass that has it's mostly whiskey with a splash of cola and some ice in it. Because my goodness, if there's one thing that makes me want to drink, it's reading religious pseudo-history. Or pseudo-history about religions? I guess this is both, actually. Yeah.
Man, one day we should have like a stream about Bob Lazar. You talk about that Netflix documentary about him, which was actually really good. So
it was very entertaining. I will say. In case you guys don't know, Bob Lazar is basically a guy who claimed that he worked at like a satellite facility of Area 51, and he had all these briefings about like alien technology because he was an engineer who's trying to like reverse engineer alien tech. But also apparently he got a whole bunch of like treatises on like alien like philosophy and stuff, which is weird because why would you do that? Especially after he said that, you know, he wasn't even allowed to look at the parts he wasn't working on. So like, but also they were giving you an entire lecture about alien philosophy. Okay.
Well, my favorite part of his story is about Element 117, which at the time didn't exist.
Yep.
And he claimed it was the key to their like anti-gravity drives or whatever. And I love that in like the 30-something years since he started telling his story, Element 117 has in fact been synthesized for like, microseconds or whatever. Yep. And it definitely doesn't do anything like he said. What a shock.
He's retreated like, oh, there's a stable isotope. And it's like, there physically can't be, buddy. Sorry.
Right.
We actually knew that way back then, that if it could be synthesized, it wouldn't be stable. But whatever. Anyway, by the time Muhammad died, the religion of Islam was exploding. You know, there's a joke there, and I think everyone knows it, but I'm not going to say it because the last stream got demonetized immediately, and I want this one to stay monetized for at least a little while.
I kill you.
Oh, man. So actually, I appreciate that wording, because like, you know what, Jack? I see what you did there. The nomadic Arab tribes were joining forces in the name of Allah and his prophet. So that's partially true and partially not. So one of the things is that you have to remember that there was an event called the Apostasy Wars. So Muhammad dies, and immediately a large portion of the various tribes, some of whom were nomadic, but many of whom were not, who had pledged to his cause and at least ostensibly converted to Islam, were then like, yeah, we were kind of here for like the plunder. We don't really care about your religion, so we're gonna just go away now because we don't trust any of the people who are vying to be his successor to actually keep the plunder coming in. And so there was a whole big war fought by the people who didn't leave Islam to go sort of reconquer those people and reconvert them. So it's not just a smooth transition from, oh, Muhammad dies and all the tribes just keep on joining Islam and they start exploding onto the scene. Like there was conflict, and even after that, there were discussions about who was a valid successor. Was it Ali? Was it there's a whole bunch of options, and that's why today you have divisions like Shi'i and Sunni Muslims. That split stretches all the way back to who should be the immediate successor of Muhammad. There wasn't just this.
For a very condensed and pretty picture version of this story, go watch the video on Useful Charts about the lineage and succession of Muhammad.
Useful Charts has some really good stuff. In their, quote, holy book. Man. Okay. I get that you, not being a Muslim, don't consider this book to be a holy book. But, like, they do, so don't put the scare quotes, man. It just makes you look like a dick.
He doesn't care.
Oh, that's true. Plus, he's dead, so... In their holy book...
we can dunk on Jack Chick all we want and not feel bad about it.
I wouldn't feel bad about it either way.
If he was alive,
yeah, exactly. But... In their holy book, the Quran, Jesus is regarded as only a prophet, but also the Jewish Messiah. That's in the book. It says that he's the Messiah for the Jews. In fact,
all the Jews are like, what?
In fact, one of the criticisms the Quran has for Jews is that they didn't accept Jesus as a Messiah. And then the criticism for Christians is that while they did do that, which good job, they then deified him, which bad job.
Yeah.
Of course, it also says that Jews say that Ezra is the son of God, which is a weird claim since no one has ever said that.
That's not a thing.
The Quran's internal understanding of both Christianity and Judaism is a little off. It's pretty clear that whoever wrote it was only passingly familiar with both religions, which makes sense if it was written by a guy who ran caravans and, encountered lots of Jews and Christians, but didn't really, live with them and study their ideas and their scriptures. Sorry. If the Pope was his representative on Earth, then he must also be a prophet of God.
Only when he's speaking ex cathedra.
Yeah, but also, where does that even come? Like, that doesn't flow. And then, God is only a prophet, that's a full stop, and then it just starts the next thing with like a...
It just jumps back and forth, and it still hasn't given us an actual link between Catholicism and Islam.
Well, it has. It's pretended that Khadija was a former nun. And that Waraka was a Catholic monk, even though there were none at the time in that area. Which caused... Okay, so I'm going to assume that this bottom thing follows on from the... No. Oh, okay, this does follow on from the ellipsis here in the middle. Yeah, that's a very confusing layout. Okay, so if the Pope was his representative on Earth, then he must also be a prophet of God, which caused the followers of Muhammad to fear and respect the Pope as another holy man. No, it didn't.
I love that he tries to draw a mitre in this panel. In the very next panel, he's trying to draw the actual Pope crown. Yeah,
so that's the papal tiara in the right-hand panel, whereas the left-hand panel is just a sort of generic, what do you call it? Mitre. Yeah,
mitre.
That's it, mitre.
Yeah.
Specifically a Western-style mitre. Eastern Christians use a mitre that looks actually more like the papal tiara than it does like a Western mitre. Although, interestingly enough, just like there are Eastern Rite Catholics, there are some Western Rite Eastern Orthodox Christians, and their bishops tend to wear the mitre from the left-hand side. It's It's all very confusing. Um, I'll just say this. Like Religion for Breakfast says, religions are diverse.
They're internally diverse.
Yes, they're internally diverse. The Pope moved quickly and issued bulls granting the Arab generals permission to invade and conquer the nations of North Africa.
Why would they care about his authority?
First,
why would they care? Oh my gosh.
Okay, first, papal bulls are like preserved and held onto. You can basically go find pretty much all of them. So, yeah, citation needed on those papal bulls. I'm going to need to know their name and the year that they were issued, or I'm just going to say nah. Because the thing is, there's a proper way to cite a papal bull. It's actually not very hard to do. The titles are always in Latin, and there's always a year. So you just cite the title and the year. That's it. It's really not hard to cite a papal bull.
I had to do that very thing this week because I was looking up a papal bull authorizing the Holy Office of the Inquisition.
There you go.
So I had to go dig up the freaking bull that, the Pope responded to the Catholic monarchs over. So,
yep.
Yeah.
It's really not hard. Very easy to find.
Latin in a year, it's right there.
Yep. And even if you know it by the title in English, if you type in the title in English or whatever language you speak, and then type, papal bull, it'll almost certainly come up. Yeah. But yeah, also there just were no bulls saying, "Oh, you can totally invade North Africa." First of all, North Africa was already primarily Catholic, except for Egypt. So like
those damn Copts.
Why? But even in Egypt, there was a Catholic hierarchy established. In fact, it wasn't until like the 20th century that the Catholic Church decided to stop having its own Catholic Pope of Alexandria. I'm actually not positive it was the 20th century. It might have been a few before that, but it was a long time until after they really didn't have much presence in Egypt. They were finally like, all right, fine, we won't bother having a Pope in Alexandria. Because for most of its history, there were 2 Catholic popes. Anyway, the Vatican helped to finance the building of these massive Islamic armies in exchange for 3 special favors. Citation still needed. Eliminate the Jews and Christians, true believers, which they called infidels.
Okay.
So this is back to the Landmarkist Baptist conspiracy theory. So, when it comes to an actual historian's point of view, there isn't really a good history of where Baptists come from as a group. They sort of just kind of show up one day, like, oh yeah, we're Baptists. But Baptists, like many groups of Christians, want to see their particular form of Christianity as going all the way back to like at least the book of Acts of the Apostles, right? So Baptists, some of them, not all of them, many Baptists actually understand that they're almost certainly a new product of the Protestant Reformation in Europe. But some of them choose to see the idea that there was always the quote-unquote true Christians who were basically Baptists all through history, and they were horribly oppressed by the Catholic Church. Now, if you point to any actual oppression of various Christian groups by the Catholic Church, of which it's not hard to find, they wouldn't actually identify with any of them. Like, if you were like, oh, what about the Albigensian Crusade against the Cathars? I'm like, no, we're not really the Cathars. Yeah, no. It's like, well, who are you? Are you like the Eastern Orthodox Christians in like Slavic areas that Catholics sometimes went to war with? I'm like, well, no, we're not Eastern Orthodox either, because those are just Catholics. It's like, well then, man, if you can't actually identify anyone who was actually a Baptist in the past, I don't believe you that there were Baptists in the past. But this is where this comes from. Protect Augustinian monks and Roman Catholics, which, okay, so I was going to say that didn't happen, but it also did in some cases. The interaction between Christianity and Islam during the Islamic conquests was complicated, as was its interaction with Judaism. So, under Islamic law, both Christians and Jews were afforded some level of protection that, say, polytheists were not. And you can actually find treaties between things like monasteries and bishops and things with various Muslim rulers. And in fact, after conquests, they usually left the native Christian and Jewish religious hierarchies and establishments more or less intact, and then had them use their religious laws to govern the members of that religion, because really they didn't care that much if Christians like ate pork or if Jews drank wine. Like, they don't really care. What they do want, however, is the money. They want that money from you. And so they did heavily tax both groups. But like, on the other hand, there were attacks on monks and things. In fact, one of the things that finally helped launch the First Crusade was that things like monks and pilgrims were being less well protected by local Muslim rulers when they were traveling to Jerusalem. There wasn't a whole lot of other stuff like, we want the land and the money and all that for ourselves. But like, that was one of the excuses used. Conquered Jerusalem for His Holiness the Vatican. Yeah, no, look, we have contemporary accounts from Muslims as well as from non-Muslims about the motives. And the motives were for Islam, which they had their own prophet, Muhammad, didn't care about the Pope. I mean, if you want to say that they were conquering Jerusalem for the Pope, you're going to have to find someone saying that in the contemporary literature, and we just don't. Ooh, the conquest of North Africa was underway. As time passed, the power of Islam became tremendous. Jews and true Christians were slaughtered. And Jerusalem fell into their hands. Okay, so here's a fun thing. Because the Muslims were generally not interested in enforcing some kind of Christian orthodoxy, because they don't care, they think all Christians are wrong anyway, they tended to be more tolerant of religious minorities under the umbrella of Christianity than Catholics were. So if you were a Baptist living in like the 9th century, you'd be much better off under Muslim rule than you would be under Catholic rule.
This is part of the reason that so many Jews in Iberia went to largely Ottoman lands after the Edict of Expulsion in 1492. It's like, yeah, you were a second-class citizen, but you were doing a hell of a lot better than a lot of other groups.
Well, I will also note, though, that if we're interested in enforcing Muslim orthodoxy,
at least 600 years of difference, too, so...
Yeah, so it's one of those things where, basically, if you're a religious minority in a heavily religiously, like, administered state, and you're a part of that big umbrella, like, if you're a Christian minority in a Christian-run country, you're probably better off in a country not run by Christians. You're better off moving out. Whereas if you're a Muslim religious minority, you're probably better off moving out of that country and moving into a country run by Christians, because, sure, you're going to be a second-class citizen either way, but Muslims care way more about your weird heterodox ideas than the Christians do. As far as they're concerned, you're all the same. And the reverse happens. So it's a whole complicated thing where basically everyone is being crappy to everyone else.
Yep.
Interesting note. Goodness, that's my line, man. Roman Catholics were never attacked, nor were there shrines during this time. Okay, I'm going to take a...
Oh my God.
Yeah, that's...
I can't...
Okay, so... lots of churches were converted into mosques and monasteries destroyed. And, like, okay, remember, for some reason, Jag Chick thinks that the Eastern Orthodox are Catholics. You ever hear of Hagia Sophia?
I was literally about to say, what about the Hagia Sophia?
Yeah, so Hagia Sophia was
Do you
originally...
even know what that is?
It was originally the cathedral of Byzantium. And, yeah, it got converted into a mosque. Now it's a museum, although there's a growing movement...
Well,
I'm sorry, I got a cough today. There's a growing movement to turn it back into a mosque, or at least
and
a mosque that also has
is
tours.
treating it kind of like one, so...
Yeah, it's a whole big thing. We're not going to get into, like, current religious politics in Turkey, because it's a whole big mess, but, like, yeah. It was time for the payoff. The Pope asked for Jerusalem.
He asked.
Well... Oh, sorry, that was you're supposed to be doing the speech bubbles.
Here we go. Well...
By now, the Arab generals felt the exhilaration of victory everywhere they went. They felt nothing could stand in their way. The Pope's carefully laid plans began to backfire and crumbled before his eyes.
It's just so flimsy. Like, you send a ostensibly Catholic nun to marry a random Arab who's starting a religion, and they're just off like expanding and shit, and you're like, yeah, it's cool, you guys do whatever you want. Also, I want Jerusalem, and then that's the point where you realize it's getting out of hand.
Yeah. Well, plus, even the plan doesn't really make sense. Like,
That doesn't make
okay,
sense.
former nun, go marry someone, and then hopefully he'll have visions that you can then later trick him into thinking you're coming from God. Like,
That's just so ugh.
most guys that you're going to marry out there aren't going to have visions in a cave. Like, it's not most people. Under Waraka's direction, Muhammad had written the Quran, the Great Lie. Okay, there's really no evidence that Waraka remained a significant part of like Muhammad's life. Plus, his wife actually was pretty old when they got married. Probably died of old age before a lot of the stuff in. Because I mean, we're reasonable to assume that Waraka and Khadija are close in age, so chances are he was dead by the time most of the Quran was dictated. But anyway, Abraham offered Ishmael as a sacrifice. The Bible, asterisk, why do we need an asterisk? Oh, is it just to tell us what the verse is? Probably. Yeah, see Genesis. Okay, it's just the verse.
Yeah.
That's reasonable. The Bible makes it clear that Isaac was the sacrifice, but Muhammad removed Isaac's name and inserted Ishmael. I mean, that is what the Quran has. As a result of this, Muhammad's vision, see page 16. So we're talking about the night flight to Jerusalem. The faithful Muslims built a mosque, Dome of the Rock, in Ishmael's honor on the side of the Jewish temple that was destroyed in 70 AD. Should be AD 70, Jack. Making Jerusalem the second most holy place in the Islamic faith.
I love that they just don't understand that the reason that it's like built over a specific rock is that is ostensibly the rock where Abraham did this.
Yeah. So there's a few things there. There's that. Also, it's this because it's the site of Muhammad was allegedly flown to. There's also that. I don't know if you can reasonably say it was specifically in Ishmael's honor. But also, it wasn't the thing that made Jerusalem a holy place in the Islamic faith. Islam maintained that Jerusalem is the site of a whole lot of the various stories of prophets and whatnot that are in the Quran, because a lot of those prophets are just the same character from the Bible. So, like, there was a reason why before it was Mecca, Muslims prayed towards Jerusalem for a significant portion of like the life of Muhammad. This wasn't a new thing. Scott Duke says, ever read J.M. Carroll's Trail of Blood? I was given a copy at the Landmark Missionary Baptist Church I went to as a teenager. So I am somewhat familiar with it. I have not actually read the full text though, but yeah, it is an attempt to trace Baptists back basically to the Acts of the Apostles. And there's a reason it's not taken seriously by any historians that I'm aware of.
Why.
Yeah. Basically, the parts of it that are even reasonably accurate are just like, hey, look, this was a person who was killed by the Catholic Church for alleged heresy. That was our guy. But then, like, you look into what was he actually teaching, and it's usually not what the Baptists were teaching. How could they give such a sacred shrine to the Pope without causing a revolt? I mean, probably couldn't, but like, so? So the whole idea behind this is they're supposed to be fearing the Pope as a holy man, as his own prophet. And now, for religious reasons, they're like, no, we're not going to give the prophet thing. Like, the internal logic is just not working. The Pope realized that they had created, that what they had, Pope realized that what they, no, he, get your number right here.
That what they had created was out of control. I guess he's speaking in terms of
the Catholic Church?
The institution.
In that case, just don't use look, here's the thing. Don't use a pronoun unless the antecedent exists as a noun earlier. Catholic Church is not earlier in this. It's all about the Pope. So the only reasonable antecedent for this is Pope, which means you got your number wrong. So what you say here, this is just writing advice, right? What you say here is the Pope realized that what the Catholic Church, or what he and the Catholic Church had created, that's how you properly do that. Otherwise, it just sounds like you don't know English. was out of control when he found out the Muslims were calling His Holiness an infidel, like they did from as soon as they knew that he existed. Because the thing is, they didn't care what kind of Christian you were ever, right? Like, Islam has never really had a big concern with whether or not you're Catholic or Orthodox or whatever. You're in the Christian bucket, and there you go. We have a way to deal with you in terms of, Islam's internal logic, and the exact nuances of your particular theology, not very important as long as you're not a Muslim. The Muslim generals were determined to conquer the world for Allah. They now turn their eyes towards Europe. I mean,
using literally anachronistic ships.
Yeah. Although also that sentence is actually not too inaccurate. I mean, they did. There was a fair bit of what you might now call manifest destiny going on in the Islamic world.
Mm-hmm.
Because the thing is, at least at the time, the internal conception of history for Islam is that Islam is blessed by God, spread because it is the one true religion, and it is bringing enlightenment to areas that are currently in a period of ignorance.
Weird. That sounds familiar.
I mean, that's kind of the line of most militaristic ideologies generally. So yeah, I mean, that's sort of how you motivate people to go try and conquer the world for your ideology. You say that you're the ones who are spreading enlightenment, and that everyone is going to be better off for it. Islamic masters approached His Holiness, say the Pope, man, in the Vatican,
Papa.
and asked for papal bulls to give them permission to invade European countries.
Need
No
permission. They don't care. They're not under his authority.
The next sentence makes the whole thing ridiculous. The Vatican was outraged. War was inevitable. So then why did they ask you for permission if war was inevitable anyway? Why bother? And the thing is, there's no record of this ever happening. It's just not a thing. I mean, the invasions were. I like the chubby Pope.
I need to do an impression of him shaking with rage.
Temporal power and control of the world was considered the basic right of the Pope. No, it wasn't. He wouldn't think of sharing it with what he considered heathens. All right, so here's the thing about that.
Which is why he wouldn't start a new religion. Weirdos.
Well, yeah. So here's the thing about that. Europe wasn't theocracy. It was officially a Catholic region for most of it, although there were except for the parts that were like officially Eastern Orthodox. But the Pope, or the Church and the state, weren't the same power center. They were actually rival power centers at most times throughout most of like medieval Europe, where they were always jostling for who had exactly which bits of power, who could appoint which officials, who owned how much land, all that stuff. There was always a rivalry between these two groups. The Pope wasn't just in charge of Europe. That's why you get so many papal bulls saying the same thing over and over. Because if it had worked the first time, you wouldn't need to reissue it. So, yeah. Like, there's more than one papal bull saying, like, hey, the church gets to decide who the bishop is of any given area. There's multiple bulls about how to deal with the same kinds of heresy. In fact, there's actually, if I remember correctly, more than one bull telling the Spanish Inquisition that it was no longer authorized. But at that point...
Which they promptly ignored.
Right, because at that point, they were largely under the control of the state, not the Pope. Because the king and queen were like, no, we're going to keep going. So, like,
well, it wasn't even just that Fernando and Isabella were like, no, we're going to keep going. It's that the inquisitors that they had appointed were just absolutely power drunk by this point. There's a reason the name Torquemada is just verboten, even to this day.
And there's a reason why there's a character of that name who's literally an inquisitor in the Warhammer 40,000 universe.
Yeah, that dude went way too hard. And he got called to Rome like at least 3 times over it, so...
Yeah.
He had no chill.
One of my favorite things about the 40k Torquemada is that his motto is, innocence is no excuse.
Yeah, that tracks.
Yep. It's like, yeah, you guys knew who you were naming this guy for. That makes sense.
Yep.
How many anti-popes existed? So,
oh god.
Yeah, there were so an anti-pope is basically just anyone who's claiming to be the Bishop of Rome who you don't think is the Bishop of Rome. And at various times there was more than one. And so the thing is, the way the Pope is selected has changed over the years. And for quite a while, there wasn't really anything written down and like official, like this is how the Pope has to be selected. So it was pretty easy for someone to just be like, this guy, this is the Bishop of Rome now. Sure, he lives in Versailles. But like...
Man, this former Pope was so terrible. I'm going to dig up his bones and have a trial about it, and then we're going to throw his body in the river. But then JK...
Well, actually, that's another thing that's interesting, is that while throughout the medieval period, the Pope was generally seen as in charge of the Catholic Church, that actual level of power, even within the Church, varied considerably from time to time. So, like, the idea that the Pope is basically now like an automatic living saint who is unquestionably in charge of everything that goes on in the Catholic Church is really a modern invention. That really wasn't how most Christians in the medieval period thought about it. There's a reason why when Dante is going down through hell in the Inferno, that like a quarter of the people he meets are former popes.
You know what? It's unsettling for me to read Inquisition records, but also hilarious because the Mexican records, it's not like people were just blindly going along with things, okay? Humans don't change. There was never a monolithic Catholicism, even in the New World. And there are records from the Mexican Inquisition where it's listing an overview of why a certain person was brought before the panel and what they said or whatever. And one guy was brought before the Inquisition for saying, yeah, well, all the saints are in hell anyway because people just make them saints through money.
I mean, that's not entirely inaccurate.
That's a spicy meatball.
So there's a few things. One, yes, there was a period when there were up to 4 claimants to the throne of the Bishop of Rome, the throne of Bede. And Vadim, yes, I was exaggerating when I said the Pope is a living saint. That is not actually the Catholic position. However,
yeah, they're only infallible if they issue something ex cathedra, which is a very specific thing when you're doing in a very specific chair.
It's a very specific thing that also doesn't have a very well defined, like, when are you actually doing it? So Benelli 1998, who's been a channel member for 21 months. Hey, hope you are feeling good. My throat is swollen and can barely talk. Got some doctor prescribed meds and talking is easy today. Well, I hope you feel better. That sounds like a rough time. Yeah. Anyway, the wars continued for centuries, and Jerusalem slipped out of the Pope's grasp, just like all those star systems slipped out of Governor Tarkin's grasp.
I love democracy.
Turkey fell, and Spain and Portugal were also invaded by Islamic forces. In Portugal, they call the mountain village Fatima in honor of Muhammad's daughter, never dreaming it would become world famous. I mean, that's true. I'm pretty sure that the people who named the village of Fatima were not planning on there being a Marian apparition centuries later. Yeah. I mean, I'm not sure why it matters, but okay. Years later, when Muslim...
He just doesn't like that, you know, a nice Christian country like Portugal would have one of those evil Arabic names.
But the thing is, he doesn't think Portugal was a nice Christian country anyway. He thinks it was a horrible satanic Catholic country that was oppressing the true Christians. Like, it's a very weird kind of stance to take. Like, you're not even on the side of the actual Christians who were there. You're on the side of hypothetical oppressed Christians who never existed in the first place. Not that there weren't real Christians who were being oppressed. Just the ones you're concerned about didn't exist. For more on Muslims see The Deceived by Jack T-Check. We might have to do that at some point. The Islamic generals realized they were too far extended. It was time for peace talks. One of the negotiators was Francis of Assisi? No, he wasn't.
What?
This dude was mostly like a hermit for a big portion of his life, and then he was an itinerant preacher. Like, I don't... Ooh.
And that kid later grew up to be Britney Spears.
Here's a fun but completely irrelevant fact that has to do with Francis of Assisi. We have records of his meeting with the Pope. For some reason, one of the things that they discussed was making the sign of the cross. And one of the questions that is a thing in Christian history, if the thing that you're questioning, is that different groups of Christian actually do the sign of the cross in different orders. Everyone goes forehead and then down, but then whether you go left or right shoulder first varies. And however, the priestly blessings that priests are giving are always going right to left. But then in some churches, the parishioners mirror it. Sorry, they're always going left to right. But then in some Christian groups, the congregation mirrors that by going right to left, but in others, they also go left to right. And the Pope apparently said that you should go right to left when signing yourself with the sign of the cross, which means at some point between that and now is roughly when the Catholic Church started having everyone go left to right. It's a weird little thing. I don't know how it matters to anyone, but that's a thing.
Cool story, bro.
I mean, yeah, it's just one of those things like there's a weird variation in Christian practice. Where did it come from? At some point after that. They went through formal negotiations and signing of concordats. The upshot of the negotiation was, well...
Turkey!
Turkey. It was all... Oh, okay, so this is the next panel here. The Muslims were allowed to occupy Turkey in a Christian world. The Catholics were allowed to occupy Lebanon in an Arab world. This is like 20th century kinds of arrangements. I'm pretty sure that like at the end of like the Muslim push into Europe, that was mostly turned back by Charles Martel, or at least he was the general in charge of the battle that took place like the farthest into Europe. That like, yeah, no, Turkey was still the Ottoman Empire. It still at least nominally controlled all of North Africa, all of what's now Turkey, all of what's now the Holy Land, as well as like up into Lebanon and Greece. Like this is nonsense. And yeah, Lebanon, I believe at the time was majority Christian, but it wasn't run by the Catholics. It was also agreed that Muslims could build mosques in Catholic countries without interference. Nope, they absolutely could not.
That is false.
The history of medieval Europe after the Crusades is not a history of mosques popping up here and there.
I mean, good God, he doesn't even... This guy's allegedly Spanish, right?
Yeah. At least by like citizenship. Whether or not he's actually like ethnically Spanish.
Mind-boggling to...
As long as Roman Catholicism could flourish in Arab countries, first, very few Arab countries have as a significant portion of their Christian population Catholics. Like they are there, but most of them only became Catholics after the various Muslim conquests, because most of those Catholic groups are actually Eastern Catholic churches that went into communion with the Pope after the Council of Florence, that was supposed to be a unification council, which was then largely rejected by most of the Orthodox. But the ones who were like, yeah, okay, they became the nucleus of what became most of the Eastern Catholic churches. Like, this whole thing just doesn't make any sense. Which also, why would you need a unification council if they're all Catholic anyway? Mr. Chick, why is that? Oh, right, it's because they weren't, but the Orthodox churches were looking for military assistance from the Catholic countries, which would be easier if they were all part of the same church again. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Cardinal B told us that both Muslim...
Speech bubble.
This whole thing has been him, though.
It's a speech bubble. I'm
Fine, you can take the speech bubble.
Cardinal B told us that both the Muslims and Roman Catholics agreed to block and destroy the efforts in their common enemy, Bible-believing Baptist Christian missionaries. Through those concordats, Satan engineered the spiritual destruction of the children of Ishmael. He built a solid wall of opposition against the, quote, word of God to keep it from reaching the poor Arabs.
Aww.
After the signing of the concordats, a tight control was kept on the Muslims down from the Ayatollah. Through the Islamic priests, nuns, and monks. Do Muslims have nuns?
They don't even have priests or nuns or monks.
Oh my God.
None of those things exist.
The Vatican also engineered a campaign of hatred between the Muslim Arabs and the Jews. Before this, they had coexisted peacefully. No. God,
So,
that is just, oh.
Islam does not actually have a formal clergy. There isn't like an ordination system or like a hierarchy of priests and bishops or anything like that. What actually happens is that basically anyone who knows how can lead group prayers, at least any man who knows how, if you're in relatively conservative Muslim groups. And the people who are then put in charge of, like congregations in a way that's analogous to, say, like a Protestant minister or a Catholic priest, are usually the people who went and did a lot of studying of the Quran and, Islamic theology and things like this. But they aren't like, there isn't like an ordination process like you would find in Judaism or Christianity, where like you have to receive a particular blessing from someone who already has this particular office to become like a priest or a rabbi or something. It's not really a thing. There is at least historically, the Caliph was seen as the head of Islam overall, although who exactly the Caliph was going to depend on which kind of Muslim you were. But there currently isn't anyone really accepted as the Caliph by any big parts of Islam. There's a small sect that I think mostly exists in like India right now who do claim to have a Caliph, but like they're a tiny little sect. So yeah, no, there are no monks and nuns in Islam. The closest you get are people who are dedicated to various Sufi brotherhoods, but that does not generally involve living in a separate community or on your own, and it does also not involve celibacy. So, yeah, there are no Muslim monks or nuns, and there are no Muslim priests. B-Hull 242 says, does this guy know anything about Islamic authority figures aside from Muhammad and Jesus? Yeah, and the Shiite Muslims had an Ayatollah. Yeah, there's another thing, is that most Muslims are Sunni, and the Ayatollah is only really going to help you as a religious authority with Shia Muslims, which is the minority group. Although historically they often had a lot of power outside of what you would expect based on just their population. Currently, that's not really the case, but historically, a lot of the really expansive empires were actually run by Shia Muslims with a somewhat oppressed Sunni majority. Yeah. Anyway. The entire Islamic community looks upon the Bible-believing missionary as a devil who brings poison to destroy the children of Allah.
Stay away from him. That's Mama.
I love how our Muslim man here is about to take out a dagger to stab our absurdly friendly American, presumably
Tourist.
missionary. Yeah, in his little ball cap. Oh man, the heartbreaking reports by missionaries telling of years of work with only a handful of converts from the Muslim. That was a pretty typical way to spell it at the time, so I'm not going to get too picky about that.
But he's been spelling it the other way this entire time.
Oh, has he?
Yeah.
Yeah, he has, because I haven't mentioned it. So yeah, weird. Stick to a particular spine. With only a handful of converts from the Muslim faith has them bewildered, worn out, and discouraged.
I don't know why we can't reach any of them.
Let's see. Oh, those missionaries know nothing about the secret agreements between Mecca and the Vatican that has destroyed their efforts in soul winning in those dark lands.
Oh my god.
Okay, let's say all of this craziness is true. Would knowing about it make the job of a missionary any easier?
No.
I can't see how. With Mecca and the Vatican fully at peace, the old horror Revelation 17 and 18 got her Jesuits busy again, plotting and hatching schemes to control Islam. Because if there's one
multiverse reality is this?
Yeah, if there's one person that Muslims always listen to, it's Jesuits.
Mm-hmm.
They pay so much attention to the Jesuits. Which, by the way, by and large, the Jesuits aren't a shadowy cabal. They're just an order of priests who, despite being not necessarily in Rome, have the Pope as their direct bishop. That's basically the whole thing. Is they don't answer to local bishops. They answer to the Pope. That's the whole thing. It's really not that complicated or all that shadowy. Actually pretty open. And most of them do stuff like teach at Catholic seminaries and like run Vatican-owned telescopes. It's actually pretty
Lucifer.
Yeah, it's pretty boring when you actually find out what the Jesuits mostly do. Or a lot of them also do administrative work in the Vatican. It's really not very interesting. Or often
Listen, a conspiracy isn't going to do its own red tape.
Well, My goodness. Yeah, it's sort of like when it's like, oh, the Masons are gonna take over the world. It's like, dude, look into this. It's really not as shadowy a cabal as you think it is. It's pretty boring when you get down to it.
I'll ask my brother if he's taking over the world.
Oh, is he a Mason? Well, he's gonna be at the highest level. Otherwise, he doesn't even.
Oh, that's
know.
right. That's right. That's right. I forgot.
Yeah, because you gotta have a conspiracy within the conspiracy. You can't just have a straight up conspiracy. That's why I'm sure most Jesuit priests don't know until they become super priests.
Super priest.
I mean,
He's a super priest. Super priest. He's super priestly.
Archpriest is a title in some churches. I don't know if it is in the Catholic Church. Guys, go find out. Someone go find out if archpriest is an actual title used by the Catholic Church and let me know. I don't think it is, but then again, in 1910, Portugal was going socialistic.
Yeah.
Red flags were appearing everywhere. The Roman Catholic Church was facing a major problem there.
Hooray! We proclaim the birth of the People's Social Republic of Portugal. Destroy the power of the church.
It was just about the right time for the Virgin Mary.
I'm sorry, I just had to throw in like
Fatima.
extremely based Portugal.
It was just about the right time for the Virgin Mary to put in an appearance. But there had to be more benefits from this apparition than just holding Portugal in the iron grip of the Vatican.
Where was she this whole time then?
Hiding? I don't know.
She couldn't have appeared to anybody this whole time and been like, yo, stop following Islam.
Well, I mean, it's not like Fatima is the first alleged Marian apparition.
I know that. I'm just saying, like, he could be like, well, Mary's the reason that Portugal didn't, go full-on evil commie socialist. It stayed Catholic. So if she's that important to stopping evil stuff, why didn't she just appear to people who were already having visions?
Okay, so Tesla Ranger, yeah, it's probably someone analogous to Monsignor. Yeah, that was probably the title that you would go with if you wanted to be a super priest in the Jesuits, Monsignor. And then, yeah, be all 246 is just archpriest is just used by the Eastern Orthodox. Although, like Tesla Ranger said, I suspect some Eastern Catholic churches. There's way too many titles out there for various like shades of gray subdivisions within Catholic and just Christian clergy, generally speaking.
Anyway, where will it happen? Here, in Fatima.
The Jesuits wanted Russia involved, and all
of a sudden, Russia. Oh my god!
Also, what does this have to do with Islam?
Because he mentioned socialist, so he had to bring Russia into that somehow.
Yeah, and also this is a completely separate conspiracy theory that the only connection is that the town is named for Muhammad's daughter. Like that's the only reason, as far as I can tell, that this is in here. And the location of this vision at Fatima could play a key part in pulling Islam to Mother Church. I've never heard of any Muslims discussing this Marian apparition as significant on the basis that it happened in a place named after their last prophet's daughter. I can't imagine a Muslim saying, well, it did happen in Fatima. Maybe Christianity isn't a polytheistic heresy. Maybe I should just go be Catholic. In 1917, the Virgin appeared in Fatima.
To 3 kids.
Yes. Well, that's another thing. Is like the Catholic Church actually spent a whole lot of time being like, yeah, this is probably not a real thing, guys. In fact, to this day, it's not like you're required to believe that this is an authentic Marian apparition to be a Catholic. You can be a Catholic in good standing and just be like, nah, this is all fake.
Even Protestant evangelicals who style themselves as somewhat like Messianic Jewish, aka L.A. Marzulli, he is obsessed with the apparitions at Fatima and thinks that there's some kind of like super spiritual, possibly UFO demonic revelation that's going to brainwash the planet. He has a whole like video series ongoing about the apparitions at Fatima. What are the secrets? What was revealed? It's just like, dude, stop. Like, this is not a thing.
Yeah. Well, also, I like the quotes here. We'll get the next sentence, but then I'm going to talk a little bit. So the quote, Mother of God production was a smashing success, playing to overflow crowds. Okay, there
God.
wasn't a stage man. But here's the funny thing, right? The reason that Mary is called the Mother of God is to emphasize the divinity of Jesus. So, generally speaking, those churches that are big fans of that title, when you are questioning that title, you're basically just saying, I'm not so sure that Jesus was God. And I don't think Jack Chick realizes the reason that Mary is given that title in
Well, to
the rest of
him and
Christianity.
most Protestants interpret that to mean she is above God the Father, Mother of God. Like that's how they interpret that.
Yeah.
And considering that Roman Catholics claim that Mary was herself immaculately conceived, that's going to rub a lot of Protestant feathers the wrong way.
Oh, look, I'm not disagreeing. I'm just saying that, like, you might want to look into the reason this title is used.
They don't care. They're
That's
praying to
true.
someone who is not Jesus, so it's therefore idolatry.
It doesn't even require you to actually ask for intercessions from Mary for that title either.
I mean, the Roman Catholics call her what they call her? Mediatrix.
Yeah.
So
Co-mediatrix.
Co-mediatrix, whatever. But you say 10 times as many Hail Marys as you do in Our Father, so that's a little sus.
I mean, I'm not going to get involved in, like, taking sides in the internal Christian
I just
theological
want to
debates.
dunk on him for a minute,
That's
so
fair.
we can move on.
But all I do want to say is, if you're going to be involved in an internal Christian theological debate, you should actually understand what side you're arguing against actually believes, which Jack Chick seems to not do.
Jack Chick loves Strowmans.
As a result, the socialists of Portugal suffered a major defeat.
Yeah, I'm sure that's exactly why.
Yeah.
All right, we're back to speech bubbles. The Roman Catholics worldwide began praying for the conversion of Russia after a Portuguese vision happened. Okay.
Yeah, sure, why not?
And the Jesuits invented the novenas to Fatima, to which they could perform throughout North Africa, spreading good public relations before the Islamic world. Of course, the poor Arabs thought they were honoring the daughter of Muhammad, and that's what the Jesuits wanted them to believe.
What? Did anyone claim that the Marian apparition in Fatima was actually an apparition of, like, Fatima and not Mary? And also, Vadim says the cult of Mary is a very important part of Catholicism. Oh, it is. It is. It's just that the reason that she's called the Mother of God is because of an affirmation of the divinity of Jesus, and not because of her own. That's why the importance of the cult of Mary is why she gets other titles, like co-mediatrix.
Queen of Heaven.
Queen of Heaven, yeah. So that's reasons for that. But this just, the title itself, Mother of God, is specifically was codified to affirm the divinity of Jesus in an actual ecumenical council that involved, like, you know, churches from all over the place, including, as in most of those councils, at least invitations sent to churches outside of what was then the Roman Empire. It was a pretty big deal to say that this was an affirmation of Jesus' divinity. Like, that's the whole point of it. As a direct result of the vision of Fatima, Pope Pius XII ordered his...
Oh, wow. National German Socialist...
No pope had a National Socialist army. It's true that the last concordant the Pope signed, or any pope signed, was with Hitler's Germany. But it didn't give him control of the army, and during World War II, various what do you call them? Monasteries in Italy hid refugees, while Italy, the country, was itself an ally of the Germans. So, like, yeah, also, Germans didn't really hold on to that concordant, because then they allowed their allies, and as well as themselves, to do things like destroy monasteries. Like, it's
Weird.
Yeah. My goodness. The vision of Fatima didn't die down. Of course it did. It's gone. There's no one currently in Fatima saying that they're currently seeing the Virgin Mary.
But the Pope hasn't unsealed the true third secret. He just unsealed a fake third one.
Yeah, because the one he unsealed wasn't interesting enough for all the crazies.
Exactly.
A few years after he lost... Oh my goodness.
He lost World War II. He personally.
The Pope was not one of the parties fighting World War II. And,
Oh my God.
and look, I'm not uncritical of the Catholic Church's role in World War II. For one thing, while they were hiding a bunch of refugees, they also really pushed hard for a lot of war orphans from Jewish families to convert. Just because.
That's exactly what they did in fucking medieval Spain. So, I mean, that shit never changes.
Is that worse than just handing him over to the Italian fascist state? No, it's better than that. But it's also not exactly like
It's still
a good guy move.
still genocide though,
Yeah.
because you're gonna raise them as Christians. So
yeah, so it's not really okay. But also to say that they were just unambiguously on the side of the Axis powers is just very wrong. They weren't. Like in most things that the Catholic Church has done, there's a whole lot to criticize. But there's also you can't just make up that they were just on the side of the Axis power. They weren't. They really weren't. A few years after he lost World War II, Pope Pius XII startled the world with his phony dancing sun vision to keep Fatima in the newspapers.
He did it. How did he do it? Is he magic? Did he own like a what's it called, a hologram machine?
And the thing
I
is,
just remember like, yes, World War I. That was all of Europe versus all of the rest of Europe. And World War II, famously, Pope Pius XII versus everyone else.
I guess, and he had his own army, even though he definitely didn't. But here's the other thing. Again, like with the earlier Marian apparitions, the dancing sun thing was something that the Catholic Church was like, you shouldn't just automatically accept this. We're going to be a little like, is this real kind of thing, which is their standard go-to anytime that someone reports a miracle. The Catholic Church's standard response to reports of miracles is to say, don't accept this automatically. We're going to do some investigation. And their usual response to investigations is to say there was no miracle. Now, whatever.
And then people usually ignore it and go build shrines anyway. So
like, if this is an invention by the Pope, then it's weird that it wasn't reported by him, and that the official bureaucracy of the Catholic Church spent most of his time being like, nah, probably not.
But, you know, Jack Chick says nah, so.
Yeah. It was a great religious show. It was great religious showbiz.
Oh my God.
The whole world swallowed it. No,
they didn't.
Some Catholics did. And by this time, you gotta remember that the Catholics are no longer like the hegemons of Europe. There's a lot of Protestants. There's an increasingly large numbers of people who just don't really care about church at this point.
I mean, Europe is largely secular.
Yep.
So, yeah, I don't know what they get.
Although it was less so at this point.
Yeah.
Not surprisingly, Pope Pius was the only one to see the vision. No, he wasn't.
No.
Famously, many crowds of people reported all seeing the dancing sun. That's one of the reasons that it's taken seriously, is because a large number of people reported seeing roughly the same thing at the same time. In fact, I don't even think Pope Pius was there for any of those. Although I'm not positive.
I don't think he was either.
Out of all this, a group of followers has grown into a blue army worldwide, totaling millions of faithful Roman Catholics ready to die for their Blessed Virgin.
No.
Yeah, that's not...
No.
It's not really a thing. I mean, sure, there are definitely Catholics who are willing to...
It's just a bunch of vatos out of, like, the barrio in fucking LA that are just like, hey, fool.
Yeah.
You're talking shit about our mom.
And even in those cases...
I'm Mexican. I can make that joke. Don't at me in the comments.
And interestingly, even the very strong cult of Mary activity in Mexico often ends up being syncretized with local traditions.
I mean, that's the whole thing about Santa Muerte that came along. Like, even the Catholic Church locally is like, guys, stop syncretizing, stop doing the pagan thing. And they're like, no, more Santa Muerte.
Like I said, I'm not going to get involved in that internal debate there, but like, yeah, you can't just pretend that the Catholic Church is all like, oh yeah, this is totally what everyone should be doing. They don't want people doing that.
And the people are just like, well, too bad.
Yeah, which on the one hand both betrays the fact that Jack Chick has no clue what he's talking about, but also that like Catholic Church is opposing most of the things that he says that they're for. And as far as anyone can tell, always have been.
Semantics.
Whatever. But we haven't seen anything yet, haven't we? We're already on page 23.
Robert Madewell, Santa Muerte is not Zombie Mary. That is literally not what that is. It's syncretization of like indigenous Mesoamerican death imagery and the embodiment of like death as a figure, along with Catholic imagery. It's not Mary specific.
Yeah.
Go watch the Religion for Breakfast video on this. It's actually very good.
A lot of the imagery is taken from Marian Catholic imagery.
But Santa Muerte is not Mary.
Right. No, it's
like
not.
It's a completely different entity. So, yeah.
She's just often dressed like Mary.
Yeah, but it's definitely not her because Mary doesn't have a giant skull face and isn't all about like, death.
Are you sure? Have you met her?
It's pretty metal, actually.
The Jesuits have their Virgin Mary scheduled to appear 5 times in China, a number of times in Russia, and some really big appearances in the US, and the people are going to buy it. Okay, if there's a schedule, I want dates. Because if I don't get dates, then I'm calling BS on this. Also,
book her like a wedding singer.
Also, let's say that there's a bunch of Marian apparitions in Russia. Why wouldn't that just be like seen as like
Orthodox?
The Russian Orthodox Church, which, by the way, largest Orthodox Church there is. The Russian Orthodox Church has like a slight majority of all Eastern Orthodox Christians worldwide.
I've got to give it up to the Spinal Tap reference in the chat. Liz D said, it's St. Hubbins, the patron saint of quality footwear. Thank you for that. It's one of my favorite lines in that whole movie.
What has this got to do with Islam? Yeah, that's a really good question. Let's see what the late Bishop Sheen, that's Fulton Sheen.
Who cares who this guy is? Why do we care?
He's actually a pretty famous, 20th century Roman Catholic figure. That's why.
Apparently not famous enough.
Well, okay, but he's famous among certain, relatively conservative circles of Catholics.
Okay, congrats.
Yeah. Our Lady's appearance at Fatima marked the turning point in the history of the world's 347,000 million Muslims. I'm just going to start pronouncing it that way when they spell it that way. I'm going to say Muslims. The most difficult of all religious people to convert to Christianity.
Okay, no.
Okay, so here's the thing. One, Jack, you didn't close your quotations.
Ugh. Well, the quote's not done.
Well, it's not, though, because that's a separate quote. Because there's the line there, and then there's another line, and each of them get their own close quotes, Mark.
Well, yeah, but when you start... Never mind. Just keep going.
Plus, if you want to say Christianity as it should be like in air quotes or whatever, you can't just insert quotes into a quotation. And if you want to say Roman Catholicism here, you can't just put it in parentheses, because that means you're quoting him saying that. You're saying that Fulton Sheen put Christianity in quotes, and then put in parentheses Roman Catholicism.
Roman Catholicism.
Roman Catholicism goes in brackets, buddy. Brackets. Brackets are how you tell a reader that within a quotation, you have intentionally changed or added something. An ellipsis is how you tell someone that you've cut something out.
It's just, this is minutia. It doesn't matter.
It really does, though, because otherwise...
Grammar,
You're lying. This is this
consistent
right here.
Spelling, meh.
Actually, I care less about the consistent spelling, because that's not a lie, right? That's just weird. This is directly lying. This is telling people that Fulton Sheen said something that he didn't say. Anyway, the Muslims occupied Portugal for centuries and have left their mark. I mean, it's the place name, yeah, great. And after the death of his daughter Fatima, Muhammad wrote of her that she is the most holy of all women in paradise next to Mary. Okay, look, if Fulton Sheen wrote that, then okay, fine, but Fatima survived Muhammad by decades. Like, Muhammad didn't write anything after she died because he'd have been long dead by that point. Like, this is once again, like, we can't get the chronology right. Just like in the last episode where it was like, are we in like the 4th century or the 7th century or what? And it's just all mixed up. It's just, until like the 20th century, there's just the past, and it all just kind of happens simultaneously. Like that bit in Doctor Who where Winston Churchill has to go ride a dinosaur to meet up with Cleopatra. Like, that's not how time works. Bishop Sheen believed that the Virgin Mary chose to be known as Our Lady of Fatima as a sign and a pledge that Muslims who believe in Christ's virgin birth will come to believe in Christ's divinity. Okay, first of all, there's nothing about the Marian apparitions that said that she chose to be called Our Lady of Fatima. That title is a reference to Mary in the context of the Marian apparitions, like Our Lady of Lourdes or whatever, right? The idea is you're referencing Mary specifically in the context of a particular apparition. It's not just a broad title for Mary. Whenever you say that, it alludes to those things. Same thing with the Virgin of Guadalupe or Our Lady of Guadalupe. It's because of a particular Marian apparition. When you want to reference Mary in that context, that's what you say. So, for instance, if you see like Our Lady of Fatima Catholic Church, they're being named after the apparitions of Fatima. They're not just being named after the Virgin Mary. You would call that the Virgin Mary Catholic Church, or something similar to that. He pointed out that the pilgrim virgin statues of Our Lady of Fatima were enthusiastically received by Muslims in Africa, India, and elsewhere, and that many Muslims are now converted to the Roman Catholic Church. As director of the Society for the Propagation of Faith, Bishop Sheen spoke with authority. Okay, but also, when did this happen? I mean, I don't remember there currently being a large population of Roman Catholic ex-Muslims in Africa or India. Does anyone else? Does anyone have any citations on this?
Citations? Pah.
Liz D says, the Catholic Church would have gotten away with it too if it weren't for Lyndon LaRouche. In the last half of the 1800s, wait, we were just in the, whatever, it doesn't matter. Time doesn't exist for Jack Chick. It's all just nonsense. In the last half of the 1800s, which apparently is probably when the Pope had his National Socialist Army, Spain was going through political convulsions. Her Roman Catholic monarchy was tottering. And the Queen was dethroned in 1868. Spain became a republic, which only lasted for 2 years. Okay. I like the degree to which we've basically just completely ignored Islam at this point, and it's now just like weird Catholic conspiracies that you just kind of tack on, and the Muslims bought it too. Like, okay, sure.
Hey.
Then the monarchy was restored until 1923. Okay. That's political.
What happened after the 1920s in Spain?
I feel like there was a different non-hereditary monarch dictator guy.
Some sort of a authoritarian, maybe.
Something you might describe as like a far-right junta.
Weird.
It's almost like there's a reason why we get the word junta from Spanish.
Weird. I mean, to be perfectly frank, maybe it was a dictatorship of some other type.
Nope. Probably not.
Nah.
As political conditions grew worse, Spain again became chaotic. The Vatican was...
That's a way to undersell it. Thanks, Jack.
I mean, yeah, it's like, that's definitely underselling, but like,
you're gonna have a bad
true,
time.
It did become chaotic. I'll give them that. There was a lot of chaos. The Vatican was outraged when Spain chose once more to become a republic, and immediately the Catholic Church moved to sabotage it.
Okay.
Yeah, guys, there's really not a whole lot of history in the 20th century of the Catholic Church like agitating for Catholic monarchies. They know that ship has sailed. During this time, from 1931 to 1936, about 5 presidents came and went. Spanish Roman Catholics were showing their contempt for the Vatican's power, never dreaming what was in store for them.
Well, he didn't mention what happened after the 20s and 30s, so how would we know what was in store for them?
Yeah, we're going to skip over that whole fascist thing. Well, I mean, you know what? I'm not going to speculate. Never mind. During this time, from 1931 to 1936, we already said that. They taxed church property and removed priests and nuns from teaching in public schools.
Okay.
Okay.
Spanish Catholics are opposing our move towards fascism. Now
Wait,
they're fascists?
Okay, hold on. The dictatorship that you're supposed to be upset about is the fascists.
Oh my god, it's all the same to him.
Look, anyone who isn't him is just a monolithic pillar of evil. There can't be internal like conflicts or anything like this. Fascism, Russian
is socialism, is communist, is
all,
chaotic.
It's
is
all Islam. It's all just the same thing. So apparently, the Pope is trying to become a fascist by opposing the fascist dictatorship in Spain. That makes sense. That's a whole thing.
Yeah, that makes a whole lot of sense.
Yep, sure.
We must make an example of them. An ejemplo of them. Let us destroy them and call it a crusade against communism.
Yes, we're gonna crusade against communism by undermining the fascist dictatorship of Spain. That checks out.
I freaking can't. Quick, where was Spain during World War II? Take a moment, I'll wait.
Even though the several presidents of the Republic were Jesuit trained.
Jesuit trained.
Were they? I mean, actually, I wouldn't say it's impossible that any of them, like, they might have gone to Jesuit schools at some point.
Yeah, I mean, but
the thing is,
he's just piling it on at this point.
Jesuit Catholic school. Look, I went to a Catholic school. It wasn't a Jesuit school, but here's what happens in the Catholic school. You go to normal classes, and then one of your classes is also a theology class, and then every so often you go to mass. Like, you're not receiving secret instructions about how to, like, destroy communism and be a fascist in Catholic school, generally speaking.
That's an elective.
Yeah. Actually, Latin was an elective at my Catholic school. Didn't take it. I probably should have.
That's where you would have learned all the secrets, man.
Yeah. Well, actually, at this point, I still keep in contact with some of the people who I know did go to that elective, and I'm currently better at Latin than they are. Probably wouldn't have helped.
Hey.
Even oh, and we were at that. They opposed the power of the Vatican and played into the Vatican's hands. Okay, so they opposed the Vatican, but also played into its hands. Oh, I mean,
this is so convoluted.
Yeah, the Islamic leaders, just all of them.
The Islamic leaders, just nebulous.
There's like 3 of them apparently.
Yeah.
They were contacted. They owed a debt to the Vatican for double crossing Rome. Why would they care?
God, why would they care?
You think there's like a scorecard being kept in some mosque somewhere in Saudi Arabia where like, well, we were kind of dicks to the Pope that one time. We should probably help out next time he talks to us. But my goodness. Yeah, from generations ago, Muslims have a moral obligation to the Pope from their ancestors who didn't actually betray the Pope because there had never been that agreement, but okay.
I want to nitpick slightly. Liz D says Juan Carlos I is still alive. He pulled an Uno reverse card by gaining Franco's trust and then restoring democracy when Franco died. Okay, I'll grant some of that, but also the fact that Spain has a constitutional monarchy kind of undermines the whole democracy thing. Listen, I'm anti-monarchist. The fact that anybody has one in 2022 is kind of just like mind-boggling to me, so I'm gonna dunk on a monarchy.
Also, the king of Vatican City is
Yep.
That's actually an absolute monarchy.
And this is not going to matter to anybody, but just for trivia purposes, Queen Letizia of Spain was previously married and, got a divorce. But when she married the current king, it didn't count that she was previously married because she wasn't married in the Catholic Church.
Oh, that's convenient.
That was convenient, yeah.
Now, remind me, if you're already married and then you and your spouse convert to Catholicism, do you have to get remarried?
I don't know.
The answer is no. The Catholic Church actually officially says that the sacrament of marriage is actually officiated by the people getting married, and that for that reason, marriages from outside the Catholic Church are still. Whoops.
Well.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like people will be like, "Oh, our monarchs don't really have power," but I'm like, they get to act as foreign dignitaries. They are acting in a political office. You can say it's largely ceremonial, but the fact that they still have one, that it's not just there for decoration. Like, they're performing functions of the state. So anyway,
when they had signed
down with all monarchies.
When they had signed a concordat, they promised to help the Pope in a time of need, even to raise an army if he so desired. Now was the time. Okay,
God, they do not care about this.
Really hoping that I hear about an alleged Islamic invasion of Spain in the 1930s. I'm here for that because I think people would know.
I mean, I'm agreeing with Sir Equinox here. Monarchs are supported by the people's taxes. So yeah, again, down with monarchy.
That does
Anyway.
actually vary. There are some monarchies that are primarily supported by income from their private holdings, and then those private holdings are also taxed in some. So some monarchies are supported directly through taxes, but that's not actually a universal rule in monarchies. However,
This
it is
is
also
the-
the case
I-
that their crown properties usually are taxed at either lower rates or no rates, and also they are not allowed to just let those become truly private holdings that people could just buy from them. So it's a whole lot of... It's complicated is what I'm going to say. And I'm not...
We need a
advocating for
second
it.
like enlightenment with a bunch of like anti-monarchical like revolutions, and we just need to start over.
All right,
Sorry, let me go foment a rebellion here. Okay.
you should be able to foment more things than just a rebellion, but that's the only thing you can foment.
Okay, fine.
Let me go foment like some coffee or something.
Okay. I'll ferment some wine while I'm at it.
Ooh.
Ooh.
No, you don't
Okay.
ferment wine. You ferment grape juice to create wine.
To create the wine. You know, I bet I could make a really tasty like wine out of the what are they? Ah, shit. My brain literally just erased the word for the fruit that's in my backyard. No.
Huckleberry?
Oh my god. They're about the
Strawberry?
size and texture of avocados. There's pink ones and white ones.
Kumquat?
No. Ah, snap.
Well, just read the next speech bubble. We'll
Yeah,
think of it.
I cannot believe this. My brain just Control-Alt-deleted that entire word. I'm very salty about this. Okay. The Jesuits had done their work. The poor Spaniards would now suffer. Through secret negotiations, a huge Arab army was raised up under the command of General Franco. Okay, now we're talking about Franco, and he's
finally
leading
got
an
to him.
Arab army.
Apparently.
The Vatican financed this war machine to teach the Spaniards a lesson. Why do the Spaniards need to be taught a lesson?
Because
Why
they're
would the Vatican raise up a fascist dictator to...
Yeah, none of it makes
Can't.
much sense. In 1936, the new Spanish Inquisition exploded.
Guavas!
Well, there you go. It was called the Spanish Civil War. Secretly orchestrated by the Vatican. Yeah, it's impossible that fascists and anti-fascists could have possibly come into conflict. That's not a thing that happens. That definitely requires puppet string manipulation from behind the scenes.
Oh
No
my
one has
God,
ever
this-
opposed fascism for any reason other than because the Pope made them.
The Spanish Civil War was a Vatican... Oh my god.
To keep the world from knowing the truth, it was made to look in the news like the Vatican was fighting the communists in a holy war. Was it?
What? So wait, how is it that the Vatican is fighting communists while they're also establishing fascism?
Well, to be fair, if you're establishing fascism, you're probably opposing communists to do it.
Well, that's fair. But it's just like, are they on every side? Because wasn't like communist evil shit too?
Yeah, it's very confused. Because they don't like the fascists undermining the authority of the Catholic Church. Then the Catholic Church is also apparently pro-fascist. But also...
We want a hierarchy, just not that one.
Yeah, it's very confusing. Although, to be fair, a lot of people would say we want a hierarchy, but not the current one. That is actually a pretty common stance for a lot of people. In actuality, there was only a handful of communists in Spain. No, there were a whole bunch. The Roman Catholic institution had ordered a bloodbath on her own followers, who are the fascists.
Ugh.
Also, I really want to know where we're getting the idea of horse-mounted, saber-wielding Arabs in the Spanish Civil War.
Civil War. Alongside the rifles, because that's practical.
Oh
my god.
Guys, I can't say for certain, because, there's no way to know except time travel. I'm fairly confident there weren't a whole bunch of saber-wielding Arab cavalry in the Spanish Civil War.
This is the only way that Jack Chick knows how to depict Arabs.
Yes, they have to be wearing some kind of turban-like headgear, and if they're not carrying, like, falchion-style sabers and scimitars
I
and...
freaking can't.
My goodness, under the banner of the Vatican, Muslim forces, who again were supposed to be the enemies of the Vatican by this point, invaded
they
the Canary
betrayed him.
Islands and then attacked southern Spain. By the way,
Oh my god.
if you want to attack southern Spain, the Canary Islands is not a great staging point. They're in the middle of
It's
nowhere.
really not. It's very far away. It's like a third of the way down the coast of Africa.
There's also
just-
no strategic value to the Canary Islands.
Yeah, no, there's not. It's
At this
really
point,
far away.
They're basically just a tourist destination. That's
If
their
you,
only
if
use
you
from the
wanted to
outside.
invade southern Spain, you would go to Morocco.
Yeah, there's this whole thing called the Straits of Gibraltar. Ever heard of it?
Jeez. Oh yeah, name 3 of their albums.
The Spaniards watched in shock as Cardinal Pedro Segura led the Islamic army in slaughtering
Led an Islamic army.
unfaithful Roman Catholic men,
Roman
women,
Catholic
and children
men.
without mercy. Okay, so hold on. You're hoping to establish the power of the Catholic Church by being a fascist who opposes fascists, and to do this, you bring in Muslims to kill the Catholics. Am I the only one who thinks that this plan doesn't make any sense here?
This is really convoluted. I'm just wow.
Oh, I like that gun. It's like a breech-loading musket. That's amazing.
Yes.
It's like we said, the past is just all one blur to Jack Chick. All times are just the past. The Muslim troops were getting their revenge at last. Against whom? Against the Canary Islands? Under the blessings of the Pope. Because they care about that. Except when they don't. Oh my goodness. When I was 3 years of age, I can remember seeing Muslim troops invade our home. That's you.
Mama.
My family survived that terror, and we were fortunate. When the Inquisition...
Wow. He thinks he saw Muslim troops invade the Canary Islands under the banner of the Pope.
Yeah, specifically under the being commanded by a particular bishop, who presumably was decked out in full, bishop's regalia. Otherwise, how would he know? Actually, I do kind of like the image of someone in like a mitre and full like robes, like commanding an army of horseback riding scimitar wielding arrows. It's just so ridiculous.
Some of them have rifles for muskets, actually.
It's muskets. Some of them have muskets. Because in the 1930s, this was the height of military technology, was the scimitar and the musket.
And now he's going when the Inquisition. At least he didn't capitalize it.
Yeah. Well, so earlier he did say that this was all like a plot by the Inquisition, which, guys, that's not what the Inquisition did or does. They weren't in charge of military operations. They were a, like, local area enforcement of Catholic orthodoxy. They were more like police than an army. The Inquisition wasn't invading places. It was taking people that were already in Catholic-controlled areas and trying to make sure that they all stayed good Catholics.
That they were Catholic enough.
Right. My goodness. And the thing is, various popes have had armies in the past. They just weren't inquisitorial armies, because that's not a thing.
Nope.
Spain was in ruins, bleeding and beaten, but safely back in the hands of the Vatican.
Oh my god.
Because the fascists lost the war?
Because the fascists lost the war, it's now Catholic controlled under a literal dictator? Who's not the Pope?
Yeah, no. We have freed Spain from communism.
No, that's me.
Oh, sorry.
Gosh.
Sorry.
Libertamos España de comunismo. Gracias a Virgen. Whatever. I don't remember the word for blessed.
Thanks to the Blessed Virgin.
Yeah, I was gonna say blessed and I couldn't remember the word in Spanish. Apparently my brain has... What? Sancta. Gracias a Virgen, Santa Virgen.
Yeah. About 4 million Muslim troops occupied Spain as the protectors of the Roman Catholic faith. 4 million?
When?
Islam had paid her debt to the Antichrist sitting in the...
Oh my god, what is happening?
I'm sorry, but you can't just hide 4 million people and make this a conspiracy. 4 million people is not the kind of thing you just keep secret. My goodness. Oh, now we're going to get conspiracies about the Catholic Church and Israel. That's going to be fun.
Oh my god, because yeah, we're just going to completely forget that Britain exists.
Which, by the way, hadn't been Catholic for centuries at this point.
This is so bad.
So the Pope Vadim points out that the popes have troops, the Swiss Guard. So kind of, they are a military force, but they're
really just ceremonial guards at this point.
No, that's not true. If you
Are they not?
If you mess around in the Vatican, you will be met by heavily armed, camouflaged clad Swiss Guard who are extremely highly trained.
All right then.
The ones who are wearing the puffy, like blue and yellow uniforms with the halberds are on ceremonial duty. But yeah,
gotcha.
You mess around in the Vatican, you will find out that they are not just a ceremonial guard, but they are primarily a security force and not a military in the sense of like they're not going to invade anyone. Because even though they are a very highly trained and very elite force, there just aren't enough of them to go invade someplace.
There you go.
So yeah, do not mess around with the Swiss Guard. You will find.
Dang it! I'm gonna have to like figure out a different mechanism to go steal the menorah back then.
Yeah, you will get eliminated real fast by the actual Swiss Guard in their real military uniforms with their real guns. And actually, to join, it's actually...
Damn it, I wore my rainbow camouflage for nothing.
So they are actually taken from the Swiss military, and to join, it's similar to like trying to join the Navy SEALs in the United States military. It's extremely hard to do, and they have an extremely grueling selection process. And also, you have to be like over like 6, ridiculous like that. Be very tall.
What?
Yeah, there's a height requirement, and it's a very high height requirement.
That seems a little weird considering that the taller you are, the higher your center of gravity is, but...
Yeah, but when you're shooting a gun, who cares?
All right.
They're not getting into fistfights. They're going to shoot you. Those halberds are for show. The military-style automatic rifles that they're carrying and the pistols are not for show. The Arabs in top-secret negotiations told the Pope that they would fight for the Vatican in Spain only if the Pope agreed to never recognize any state of Israel that might come into existence.
Excuse me, what?
The Pope agreed.
What?
Okay, look.
What decade is this allegedly occurring in? Because they're using
the
demarcation lines that didn't exist until like at least the 60s.
Yeah.
Like, what is even happening?
I don't know. Hey, just on the off chance that Great Britain ever, wins a war with the Ottoman Empire and then creates a British mandate throughout much of their former territory and then decides that later on, after fighting a different war, maybe they're going to set aside a parcel of that land specifically for Jews to move to. Yeah, don't be okay with that. That's totally a reasonable conversation that definitely happened with the Pope. Are these Muslims all psychic?
They must be.
This is, I think. Oh, is there more than I'm missing down here? Oh, yeah, there is.
Mandate, which famously closed immigration down during World War II. So it's like, yeah, you guys kind of have a place to go, but you can't go there right now.
Cardinal B told us how the Orthodox Jews and the Zionists were both pushing for an independent state of Israel. If you're pushing for an independent state of Israel,
different groups.
Right. Look, maybe there are some non-Zionist Orthodox Jews. I don't know all of them. But if you're pushing for an independent state of Israel, you are a Zionist. Right? Yeah.
And the ultra-Orthodox run the religious everything there. So it's one of those fun facts that it's like, oh yeah, Israel has a right of return. If you're a Jew anywhere, you can move to Israel. Like, okay, that's nice, except unless you're an Orthodox, according to their local standards, you cannot get any sort of like marriage recognized or funeral rights or whatever.
Yeah, you don't count.
You don't count. You can move there and pay taxes, but you can't actually
Also, I do want to point out, I think it's unfortunate that in the early 20th century, Zionism just basically meant that there should be an officially Jewish state established, but now it basically just means supporting whatever the current expression of the modern state of Israel does. So I do think there's a position where you could say, I like the idea of there being a place that officially welcomes Jews, but I don't like what the current government there is doing.
I mean, there should be a word for that. I am an unabashed anti-Zionist because Zionism, as it stands right now, is settler colonialism apartheid. Yeah. So I'm against that 100%.
I wish there were a word for someone who was like, yeah, it's okay to have a state. of Israel.
Well, yeah, I
they
mean,
can't
but
do
the
the
thing
things
is,
they're
like,
doing now. They can't do that.
you've got like clown shows like the ADL who are like, if you criticize a political entity at all that's anti-Semitic, like, bitch, no, it's not.
Yeah.
It's a government, and just because they happen to be Jews doesn't mean you're being anti-Semitic. Like, they're not insulated from criticism. That's bullshit.
You're allowed to criticize Judaism without being an anti-Semite.
Yeah. I mean, fuck's sake, it drives me nuts.
Yeah.
Anyway, let me read the speech bubble before I go off on a tangent. Okay. Dr. Rivera, wasn't it a Muslim who shot the Pope? I didn't realize I was doing a quasi Ted Koppel there. Good for me.
Well, he looks kind of like Ted Koppel.
He kind of looks like Ted Koppel. Oh, yes. The Jesuits planned that very well. A lot was supposed to be gained by that incident.
I'm sorry. So the Jesuits,
Conspiracy.
who all report to the Pope, were like, yeah, let's have the Pope shot.
By an Arab, but just to make it look, it's so dumb.
You see, it gave both the Pope and President Reagan, okay, something in common.
Oh,
Both had been shot and they became fast friends. Wait, doesn't Jack Chick like Reagan? The Pope got worldwide coverage and sympathy from all the world leaders. Yeah, imagine that. Someone who's a prominent member on the world stage gets shot and then people send condolences. That's the kind of thing that happens.
I can't believe.
Shocking.
That must mean they're all secret Catholics working for the Vatican.
Maybe Ronald Reagan was a secret Catholic despite going to Protestant churches and having a court astrologer. There's a fun fact. Ronald Reagan had a court astrologer.
His wife had a court astrologer.
Well, okay, but he listened to the astrologer's recommendations, shall we say?
Yeah, I know. Just don't tell the evangelicals that.
Oh yeah, because he's their hero. Well, then again, I mean, look, their hero is also Trump, a man who can't hold a Bible right side up and doesn't know how the Bible are even named. I
literally got angry texts from my family when I called that out.
Sorry.
I did. I got angry texts, and I'm like, all right, well, stay being mad, but this guy's an idiot, so...
Look, I can see he supports policies I like, and I like those policies for religious reasons. You know what? That's a position that I think it's reasonable to take. I don't agree with you in many cases there, but like I understand that the position, right? I understand why.
Yeah, I mean, if they would
pretend that he's a devout Christian, he's not.
Exactly.
It's very obvious.
Yeah, that's why I'm like, guys, just be honest about it. Just admit that you cannot possibly paint him as a morally like good figure. Just accept it.
Honestly, I think I don't like this politician, but they support policies that I support. Therefore, I support them as a politician. It's
that's exactly what's going on. I'm like, just be honest about it.
Yeah, just take that. Anyway, we're not here to talk about weird evangelical politics of...
Damn you, Jack Chick, you're making us do this.
Right? Actually, I'm making us do this. It's just me. If you want someone to blame, you should blame me, Vishanti, because if it weren't for me, you wouldn't be here.
I hate you.
Well, we already established that earlier.
Yes, we did.
Through this incident, Islam pulled closer to the Vatican.
What is happening?
The Muslims were so humiliating to think that one of their own shot one representing the Prophet.
No, they were not.
I can't even say these things.
These are
representing the Prophet Jesus on this earth. Muslims don't think that the Pope represents Jesus because they think Jesus was a good Muslim and that they represent Jesus. As far as a Muslim is concerned, Jesus is their guy. The Christians, including the Pope, are wrong about him. In fact,
oh my gosh.
You can find it in the Quran. Jesus, in the Quran, says that he didn't tell people to worship him.
Weird.
You know what the Pope is really famous for? It's worshiping Jesus.
Oh my gosh, no.
That's a big part of papeldom. Which, yes, I know is a made-up word.
Yeah.
That the Ayatollahs sent condolences and apologies to the Pope. Well, yeah, again, world leaders.
Yeah.
They kind of look like dicks if they didn't.
That's the polite thing to do.
Yeah. When someone
this is a fever dream, man.
No. Like, if someone is more or less your peer, like you're both, like, world stage type leaders or religious officials or whatever, you have a correspondence, you talk, that's a thing that happens. It doesn't mean that they support Christianity or Catholicism specifically, right?
I think this next panel's going to give me, like, an aneurysm. And last of all, the blame could be put on the KGB.
Oh my goodness. Well, it was the last group that we could possibly have. Wait, no, he hasn't done the CIA yet. So I'm hoping that before we get to the end of this, because we're almost done.
Oh my god, we better get to that.
CIA
making the world believe that the communists are the Pope's enemies.
You said that the communists were the Pope's enemies. You said it earlier. That's not a conspiracy. That's what you think is true. Oh my goodness, I can't.
It's a big game, Roscoe. Pope John Paul II has been a good communist for many years.
Okay. Wow.
Oh, Carol the Pole was a good communist. Okay,
look, for one thing, yeah, he was Polish. If you want to find some anti-communists, go to Poland. They're not big fans, and understandably so, right? Like, they had a pretty rough time of it under communism. And yet we can argue about whether or not it was real communism. I don't care right now. When it comes to people who are not big fans of communism, the Poles are high up on that list. Now, there is a connection between Marxist thought and liberation theology coming out of Latin America, which means you could make an argument. It would be a bad argument, but you could make an argument that the current Pope has some communist sympathy because he, in fact, did engage with liberation theology in Latin America, which, again, does have ties to Marxist thought. But that's not John Paul II. That's two popes after. Or, well, one pope in the middle between them. I don't know, whatever math. You're up, Vishanti.
Okay. If that sounds cold, Roscoe, remember that its assassin, Mehmet Ali Agha, is one of Europe's top hitmen and an expert marksman. He fired his weapon at a distance of only 10 feet, which makes him an expert marksman not being really relevant.
Well, also, was he an expert marksman? That's not something I've heard, but also, I don't spend a lot of time researching the incident.
Listen, a lot of people can be expert marksmen at 10 friggin' feet away.
It's true.
Whatever. Each bullet hit the Pope below the navel. Maybe because the car's elevated above people's sightline. Anyway, you see, Roscoe, he had no intention of killing the Pope. He was just simply following the instructions of the Jesuits.
So, hold on. Here's what I'm picturing. I'm picturing John Paul II in a meeting of Jesuits, because remember, he's in charge of them, and being like, okay, guys, you gotta rough me up a little bit. Make it look good, but not too good. And that, like, it's that scene, right? Like, rough me up, but make it look good, but not too good. Right? I'm like, stay away from the face. I want to keep my hair intact. Like, okay, we'll just shoot you in the belly, because shots to the belly never kill anyone. Oh, wait.
I'm just gonna,
yes, they do.
Gut shoot this guy, and I wasn't trying to kill him.
Pro tip, if you shoot someone in the gut, they're probably gonna die. The Pope was what you call lucky. This is not something you plan to do to yourself if you were planning to survive. In fact, there is no place that is safe to shoot yourself. You can die from a shot to the thigh, shot to the arm, any of these things.
It's almost like you have things called veins that carry stuff called blood.
Yeah.
And that's supposed to stay inside your body.
Now, look, most people who are shot do in fact survive, but also there's really no place where you can be shot and there's a zero chance of it killing. There just isn't. You're going to have a lot of blood loss, and it might result in your death. Being shot is a really bad idea. Although I did hear a story about someone who was shooting people because they paid them to shoot them because they wanted the scars. That's a bad idea. Don't do that. The upshot was when the world saw the Pope forgive Mehmet Ali Agha for shooting him. Almost 1 billion Muslims had nothing but admiration for, quote, His Holiness. I mean, it's kind of a stand-up thing to do, right?
Yeah, I mean, if he was the Pope and didn't forgive him, that would look kind of dickish.
Right. But when he does, it's still like okay, that's people generally see being merciful and forgiving as a nice thing to do. So yeah, pretty much everyone was like, oh, well, that's nice.
Well, as I said, I believe it was well planned. Both the Pope and the Muslim world thank the Virgin Mary that he didn't die. Muslims thanked Mary that he didn't die.
No.
Citation needed.
Yeah.
You wonder why we sent our troops to Lebanon, which is completely unrelated to any of this, since the president has become so friendly with Pope. we ended up with a papal nuncio in Washington, D.C., and the U.S. Marines poured into Lebanon to defend the Roman Catholic nation. I'm fairly confident that Lebanon's Christian history wasn't entirely Roman Catholic.
You know, we're going to look up Lebanese religious demographics. Here we go. Lebanon religious...
Because I've known Lebanese Christians, and they were not Roman Catholic.
Yeah, me too. Let's see.
And one of them with a straight face told me that May was Mary's month.
All right. The Maronite Church is a odd group because they're Eastern Catholics that, as far as anyone can tell, never actually broke communion with the Pope. So, like, when I earlier said that most Eastern Catholic groups stemmed from after the Council of Florence, that is true, but they're one of, like, the weird ones that are, like, a long-standing group of Catholics. Yeah, followed by a Greek Orthodox and other Christian groups. So yeah, actually, it is fair to say that the majority of Christians in Lebanon. And also, it's fair to say that I basically forgot the Maronite Catholic Church ever existed, even though it's it's actually fairly significant in terms of like history. Whatever. I think we're at the horror of Revelation.
Okay.
Hey, at least he didn't say Revelations.
Yeah, I got it. The horror of Revelation 17 will stop at nothing to gain her ends, including shooting one of her own popes. Okay.
Okay, yeah. Today, the Pope is still desperately trying to gain control of Jerusalem. Okay, so he can conspire with the Muslims to have himself shot. But, like, Dome of the Rock is just beyond him. Okay, sure, whatever. The goal hasn't changed. Jerusalem will fall into the hands of the Pope, and the Muslim nations will assist him. The last Pope will be the Antichrist who knows he must flee to Jerusalem to escape from the Vatican just before it is destroyed. Revelation 17:16. The Muslim and communist armies primed to destroy Israel. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, there's a whole bunch of communist armies just ready to destroy Israel. That's definitely a real thing.
Yeah.
Will attack, and they themselves will be massacred on the mountains and deserts of Israel. I mean, the 7-Day War did already happen, so, like, shouldn't this be past tense?
You can't figure out what time it is.
Seriously. Soon after, Satan will plunge the world into the Battle of Armageddon. Although, I guess, since there weren't really very many communists fighting against Israel in the 7-Day War, maybe that doesn't count. It was mostly just the Muslims.
I'm still just very confused. This is all very convoluted and a fever dream.
This is when Jesus Christ, the King... Oh, okay, this is all just, like, oh, Jesus is going to come back stuff. So we're done now.
In the past, Satan used religion, blah, 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 blah. Satan something is Catholicism, is Islam, is blah, blah. The rest of this is just become a evangelical bullcrap.
Yeah. So, man, I'll be honest. When I started this, I only kind of vaguely knew the broad outlines of Jack Chick's, like, Catholic Islam conspiracy theory thing. I did not expect it to be that nonsensical and that convoluted. That was not something I was actually expecting.
Well,
but then I guess it's sort of like with Kent, right? There is no bottom to the craziness and the awfulness.
Yeah, there's no bottom.
It's just like no matter you think you've reached the worst that it can possibly be, and it's like Billy Mays here. There's more. Like. Yeah. So anyway, that was The Prophet by Jack Chick up until the point where it just turned into like, hey, repent now for the end is nigh. Which feel free if you want. I'm not here to give that message. Yeah. Vadim says the USSR didn't have many allies in the Arabic lands and Egypt was flipping too. Yeah, actually, so Arabic areas are not big on communism. If anything, they're bigger on things like hereditary monarchies, but which actually is not really fair. The Brits were big on establishing hereditary monarchies because they thought they would be easier to control. But whatever. So Shanti, we're wrapping up. What do you have for us? You got anything to announce?
That entire thing, just
bonkers.
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah. honestly, I'm gonna have to take a little while to recover from that. So let's take a look at my calendar, see what's coming up. Okay, so on the 31st, Tuesday, Kent with Bent. Kent with Bent, I don't know, was it like 84 or something? Thursday, the 2nd, the final episode of the Jewish Matt Powell. I don't know what's happening on the 4th. There was an idea that might be a Leaving Earth Creationism, but that has been pushed back, I believe, to the 18th. Tuesday the 7th is going to be another Kent with Bent. And then Thursday the 9th, we're going to have an episode. We're going to have a one-off video about the Gentile Matt Powell. Yeah. Because we did enough with the Jewish Matt Powell. Now it's time to turn our attention to the Gentiles. They have a Matt Powell too. You'll never believe who it is. But I'm actually the thumbnail. You guys will see it. It kind of amuses me because it's like he's got the word "goy" in Hebrew right on his forehead, and he's standing in front of a plate of bacon. Because you really drive home just how much of a Gentile he is. Nothing says Gentile like the word for Gentile and bacon. At least that's my assumption, right? Like I'm trying to imagine pretend stereotypes of Gentiles. And I feel like that I did a good job there. What do you think? No comment. I think we lost Vishanti. That's all right. All right, guys.
No comment.
All right, guys. Thanks for coming. I hope to see you guys on the 31st for Kent with Bent. Stay safe out there. Have a great weekend. And yeah, I'll talk to you all later. Bye. Before you go, I want to take a minute to thank my patrons and channel members, especially those pledging $20 or more. Work in Progress, Benthoven, Cynically Skeptic, Denny5252, Ian Chen, John Ackerman, Landon Knoll, Iapetus, Mabbity Babbity, Sphincter of Doom, Starrunner, and The Venerable Bean. Without my channel members and patrons, this channel simply wouldn't exist as it does now. You certainly wouldn't be getting up to 3 videos a week. You'd be lucky to get 1. So, if you're interested and you can afford it, check out my Patreon link in the description below or the Join the Channel button. Both of them get you access to the special patron and member-only Discord server where I like to hang out. And at higher tiers, you can also get access to other things like your names in this credit, video requests, and more. No matter how much you pledge, you always get early access to my videos, and as of the time of this recording, that's about 10 different videos that you could have access to. If a monthly pledge isn't right for you, there are always other ways to support the channel. I have a merch store linked in the description. There's also an Amazon wishlist link there. And if none of that's right for you, and you just want to support the channel without spending any money, just liking these videos, commenting, and sharing them on social media goes a long way.